Basically my piece is related to that कि एक दिन ऐसा ज़रूर आएगा. I don't know आएगा कि नहीं, but yeah. Someday, the title is Someday. And someday we'll be hitched forever. And someday we'll love each other like never. And someday we might fight over a pet dog or cat. And someday we might enjoy the crazy pillow fights. And someday you might have to sip the tasteless coffee I would prepare in a rush. And someday you might kiss my forehead after relishing my first chicken biryani. And someday you might use my lipstick to make my mustaches while I'm asleep. And someday you might make my bed tea and we could chat about our kids. And someday we might sleep in separate rooms with feisty minds and anxious hearts. And someday you might click my pregnancy pictures. And someday we might have to complete our daughter's summer work. And someday we might make fun of our enlarged bellies. And someday while sitting in the sun we might notice our hair turning grey. And someday we might count the candles on our 25th anniversary cake. And someday you might surprise me with our old pictures with hair so black and skin so shiny. And someday we might laugh together over our wrinkled skin. And someday we might have to choose a hand for our daughter too. And someday you might cry while watching her sleep before the day of her marriage. And someday we might be all alone, yet surrounded by so many memories we have managed to paint so far. And someday I might try to knit an oversized sweater for you. And someday we might enjoy our favorite delicacy which we used to share in our 20s. And someday we might smile at each other's new dentured faces. And someday I might die first, lying happily on my rocking chair, fingers entangled with the wool of your turquoise blue sweater, incomplete. And someday you might cry over my grave for hours with stick in one hand and my favorite orchids in another. And someday we might meet at the golden gates of heaven, but this time with your turquoise blue sweater completed. Thank you.